Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Notion Office Hours. I'm so excited to bring back William Nutt to do a 201 of formulas. Hopefully many of you came to the 20 or the 101 level of formulas. And so we're going to expand on that and go into the 201. So William, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm super excited about today's session.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And Marie, if you're ready for me, I'll go ahead and just kind of jump in.
Yeah, let's do it. And just to let people know, if you haven't been doing office hours before, make sure to use the ask a question area below. I will do my best to keep an eye on the sidebar, but just so that nothing gets lost, make sure to use the ask a question area below. And I'll do my best to keep an eye on that, William.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect.
Awesome. Let's dive in.
Good. And Marie, do you want to maximize my screen there?
Maximizing.
Maximized. Thank you. Good. Well, I am, like I said, so delighted to be joining you once again, this time for the Formulas 201 session. I'm William Nutt of Nutt Labs. We're an integrated digital strategy firm and Notion consultancy, typically based in New York, but currently based in the Appalachians of North Carolina while I quarantine for another 10 days since I just traveled from New York. So my setup here is a little bit makeshift, so bear with me if there might be a lag or a technical glitch or maybe not the best audio quality.
Or lights coming out of your head.
Oh, do I have a crown? That is appropriate. So I also run the website Notion VIP at notion.vip, and there I publish tools and insights about Notion. Like I said, this is our 201 session. We've already had our 101 session. If you missed that, that's available on Notion's YouTube channel. And I imagine we'll include a link to that within the description of this webcast. And in that session, we explored sort of the anatomy of a Notion formula. And kind of at the top level of composing a Notion formula, you ask three questions. The first is, do what? What actions do you want to take? The second is, to what? What input values do you want to take those actions on? And then the third is, when do you want to take those actions? Or in other words, what conditions need to be met in order to take those actions? And then which actions should you take if those conditions are unmet? So in the 101 session, we explored those first two questions, the actions and the input values. And today we're going to dive into the conditions. And to do that, we're going to do a couple of different exercises. We first, and I always need to be careful about the movement of my screen for Crowdcast. The first exercise is going to be automating the prioritization of a list of tasks. And we're going to take a couple of different approaches to doing that. And then after that, we are going to create some visual progress bars for the projects that you track in Notion. So we'll go ahead and get started with that first exercise, which is automated task prioritization, kind of a tongue twister there. So for the first one, we are going to use the Eisenhower matrix to prioritize our tasks. And if you're unfamiliar with the Eisenhower matrix, what you do is for each task, you specify whether it's urgent or not urgent, and whether it's important or not important. And so for each combination, you're going to have an action to take for the task. So if it's important and urgent, you do it. If it's important and not urgent, you schedule it. And then if it's not important but urgent, you delegate it. And if it's neither important nor urgent, then you eliminate it. So to apply this to a database in Notion, we are going to use the if function. And the if function is the way that we're typically going to specify those conditions, that third question that we ask when writing a formula. You'll use it here a lot in these exercises, and as you become more advanced with formulas, you'll use it in a variety of different ways. So these exercises are really just intended to get you comfortable with that function, and then we're going to look at a couple of others as well. So as we looked at in the 101 session, There is a formula cheat sheet on Notion VIP, and it has every formula that you can use with Notion. So, of course, that includes every function, excuse me. And of course, that includes the if function as well. So the if function is going to take 3 arguments. The first argument is an expression that needs to evaluate to either true or false. And typically that's going to be a comparison of 2 values. And then the second argument is going to be the operation to take if that expression evaluates to true. And then the third argument is going to be the actions to take if that first expression evaluates to false. So we're going to look at many examples of that. But for that first expression, I mentioned that it's typically going to be a comparison of values. And to compare those values, you're typically going to use comparison operators. So if we scroll back up to the top, and that's not going to look smooth in Crowdcast, but in real life it is. If you come to this kind of submenu at the top of the page, there's a link down to the comparison operators. And you're probably familiar with at least some of these. But basically you'll take 2 values and you'll kind of test whether they're equal, they're unequal, one's less than the other, one's greater than the other, one's less than or equal to the other, or one is greater than or equal to the other. And these are the operators that you'll use to do that. So let's look at a simple example to start. So I have kind of a little sandbox area up here for these demonstrations. So we'll come into this formula property here, and we'll start our if function with the if keyword and open it with a parenthesis. So remember that first argument is going to be an expression that evaluates to true or false. So we'll just start with something very simple. We'll test whether 2 equals 2. So we'll type a 2, and then we'll use the equals operator, which is 2 equal signs, and then we'll type another 2. So that's our first argument, an expression that evaluates to true or false. And then the second argument is going to be the operation to take if it is true. So let's just return a simple text string if it's true, and we'll just say yes. And we'll surround that in quotation marks as we learned in 101. And then if it evaluates to false, we'll just say no. And then we'll close out our if function. So when we confirm, we have 2 yeses, a yes with each iteration of the formula because they both compare 2 and 2 and return this yes since they're both true. But typically for this initial argument, you're going to be referencing properties. You're going to be comparing properties to see, if they're equal, unequal, and all the rest. So we can replace this first 2 with a reference to the item property. So let's just reference that item property, and let's see if that item property equals the text string item1. And so we'll confirm, and now our first argument is comparing whether that item property is equal to the text string item1. Our second 2 arguments are unchanged. So we can see here now that we have a yes and a no because item 1 equals item 1, of course, but item 2 is named item 2, which does not equal item 1. It does not equal the text string item 1. So one more step that we can take here. So we learned also in 101 that a checkbox property in Notion is really just a true or a false value. And if the box is checked, that's a representation of true. If it's unchecked, it's false. So we actually don't need this comparison operator when we're referencing that checkbox property. We can just reference the property itself without any comparison operator. And if the box is checked, it's going to give us our true. If it's unchecked, it's going to give us our false. So here you can see we have yes because this box is checked. And then we have no because this one's unchecked. So if we modify the state of these checkboxes, the formula changes along with it. So let's see how we can apply this if function to create our Eisenhower matrix in Notion. So you'll start with just a list of tasks. A database of tasks viewed in the table view is going to be easiest. And you'll insert two checkbox properties, one for important and one for urgent. So with each task, if it's important, you check it. If it's not important, you don't. And if it's urgent, you check it. If it's not urgent, you leave it unchecked. So simple enough there. And then you'll compose your formula that's going to render the action that you need to take based on the combination of importance and urgent. So when you're writing more complex formulas in Notion, it's helpful to do so in a plain text editor rather than Notion's kind of built-in formula composition window. That's true for a number of reasons. But what I found is the code block in Notion is actually a great place to write your formulas. So I have one here for us to play around with. This is just a code block, and it's set to the default JavaScript option, which is going to provide some formatting that helps us to visualize our formulas in a helpful way. And when you do this, this also allows you to include line breaks and indentations that also help to visualize the formula in helpful ways. So when I apply line breaks and indentations, those are not essential for the formula. It's just helpful to display the formula, and you'll see how I convert that quickly to paste into the formula property. So for our Eisenhower matrix, we first want to test whether the important property is checked. So using our if function, we'll make a reference to the important property. So we'll start our if function, and then we'll reference that important property. So that is our first argument, because remember, the checkbox is going to give us a true or a false. We don't need to make any sort of comparison. So that is our test expression there. So our second argument is going to be what we want the function to do if that important box is checked. And what we want to know is urgent also checked. So we're going to include another if function. This is called a nested if function because it's an if function within that top level if function. And this time we're going to reference the urgent property. We'll use the prop function and this time include urgent. So now we're asking, is the important checkbox checked and is the urgent checkbox checked? And so if important and urgent is checked, then we want to return the action do. And then if important is checked but urgent is not checked, this is the third argument of the nested if function. We want to return schedule. And then we can close out that nested if function, and that's going to conclude the second argument of the top level if function. So this whole if function here is the second argument of this top level if function. These are nested if functions. So when we go to our third argument of the top level if, we're going to be answering if important is not checked. So if important is not checked, we want to test, once again, is urgent checked. So we'll ask that once again with another nested if function. So now we're asking, is important unchecked but urgent is checked? And in that case, we want to delegate. And then in the third argument of this nested if function, we will be answering, is important unchecked and is urgent also unchecked, in which case we want to eliminate. So with that, we can close out our second nested if, and then we can close out our top level if and copy our function here. So in order to format this for Notion's formula property, it's not going to like those line breaks and those tabs. So you can just paste it into the address bar of your browser. That'll eliminate those unwanted characters, and then copy that. And then you can go into your action property, a formula property within this tasks database, and paste it right in there and confirm. And so now we have our actions to take according to which boxes are checked. And as you change the status of these boxes, the actions change as well. So let's look at another type of task management. And this I call the Marie matrix, after Marie herself, because this was an early method that she used of prioritizing her task. And she has since updated that method and actually simplified it, where it still uses a similar approach, but kind of merges these two separate properties. But actually, for our purposes here, it's helpful to have them separated as we're getting familiar with these formulas. So rather than evaluating the importance and urgency of tasks, the Marie matrix is going to consider the effort required for each task and the impact of the task. So in this case, we're not going to use checkboxes. Instead, we're going to use select properties. And for both effort and impact, you can choose a low level, a medium level, or a high level. So the lower the effort and the higher the impact, then the higher the priority of the task. And conversely, the higher the effort, but the lower the impact, the lower the priority of the task. And that's going to be represented with these fun series of emojis. So let's see how we do that. It's going to be kind of an expansion of the Eisenhower matrix formula that we created. So you'll start with these select properties, one for effort, one for impact. You'll give them each the low, medium, and high options. So another sort of way to ease the process of composing more complex formulas is to break them into independent properties. Rather than composing your entire formula into one property, you can break it up into chunks. You can create other properties that you can then reference within the final property. So there's some hidden properties here that have their own functions or their own formulas that serve as kind of stepping stones to the final function. So I'm going to display those. So we have an effort priority and an impact priority. These are both formula properties. And what they do is they say, if, in the effort priority case, if it's low, then we want to give it a priority of 1. If it's medium, give it a 2. If it's high, give it a 3. And then we do the same for impact, except for high impact corresponds with a priority of 1, medium with 2, and then low is a 3 priority. And then we have a total priority property, which adds the impact priority and the effort priority together in order to determine the final priority of each task. So let's do this. Let's create the effort priority. So what we'll do is we'll be using the if function once again, and we first want to ask, is the effort priority low? So we'll use our if function, and this time we'll reference effort. And this time we are going to use our comparison operator. So we want to know, is the effort property equal to low, which we put in a text string, because that's even though this is a select property, these options are of the string property or the string input type. So is the effort property equal to low? And if it is, our second argument of this if function is going to be a 1. And if it's not, then we want to test, is it equal to medium? So we don't need to write this from scratch. Again, we can test the effort property again and just change low to medium. So here we're asking, is it not equal to effort, but is it not equal to low, but is it equal to medium? In which case we want it to be a 2. Actually, we don't need another nest. We can do this on the same line. So we'll have a 2 if it's not equal to low and it is equal to medium. And then if it's not equal to low and not equal to medium, we know it's high, a high effort, in which case we want to assign a 3 to it. So we can close out that nested if and then close out that top level if, copy the formula, paste it into the address bar, copy that. and then come down to our effort priority property, paste it in there, confirm, and then we have our assigned priorities to each of the efforts. So the impact priority is going to work very similarly, but of course we'll be referencing the impact property instead of the effort property. And because high impact corresponds with a priority of 1, we're going to reverse our 1 and our 3 here. So if it's a low impact, we want the priority to be 3. Medium will stay the same, but then if it's a high impact, meaning it's not low and it's not medium, then we want it to be a 1. So we can copy that, paste it into our URL bar, copy that, and then paste it into our formula field and confirm. So that gives us our impact priority. And then, of course, the total priority is straightforward. We just want to add the effort priority and the impact priority. So we don't even need to use our code block for that. We can just reference each property and separate them with the addition operator. So effort plus, oh, actually, that's going to be the effort priority, and then the impact priority. And confirm. So we have our total priority. And then the fun part is generating the emojis that correspond with the total priority. And that's just going to be another series of if functions. So you can see kind of the versatility of the if function here. And so what we want to do is test is total priority equal to 2, because that's going to be the lowest option that we have. So we'll start with an if, and we'll reference that total priority property. So we want to know, is total priority equal to 2? And if it is, then we want to display our police lights, our alert lights, and that's going to be a text string. So we want to surround that in quotation marks. And if it's not, meaning so that was the second argument of this top level if function. So the third argument is going to be if it's not, and that's going to be another nested if. So we're just going to test total priority once again. If it's 3, then we want to display our flames. So these flames are the second argument of this nested if. And so for our third argument, we're actually going to include another nested if to test if it's 4. So it's not 2, it's not 3. Is it 4? And if it is, then we want to display our stars. And then we're going to include one more nested if to test if it's 5. So if it is 5, we want to display our coffee cups. And I think that's my cue to take a sip.
Nice.
That was not planned, I promise. And because if it's not 2 and it's not 3 and it's not 4 and it's not 5, then the only other possibility is 6, in which case we want to display our sleepy man for our lowest priority. So then we need to close out each of our nested ifs and our parent if. And when you write formulas like this, you're bound to create a mistake somewhere. So I will likely make one as I do this, and it'll be helpful for you to see. So when I paste this into the URL bar and then into our priority property, we'll see if it gives us an error. And it does not, so I didn't make a mistake, but I certainly do, and you certainly will, and it's all a learning experience. So now for each total priority, we have these corresponding series of emojis, and you can sort your database according to this as well. So these are sorted. So if I change one, then it's going to change the emojis, obviously, and also change the order that the tasks are displayed. So that is our automated prioritization of tasks. Now we're moving on to our visual progress bars. And for our visual progress bars, we're going to be working with 4 functions. We're going to be working with if again, but we're also going to be working with slice, round, and format. So if we come back to our cheat sheet, and we can do a search for slice, and you can see here that slice takes 3 arguments, and the third one's actually optional. So what slice does is it takes a full text string and it specifies a substring of that string that you want to return. So the first argument is going to be the original full string. The second argument is going to be the starting point within that original string that you want to use for your substring. And so you want to keep in mind that the way that the indexing works is that the first character of that original string is going to be at the 0 mark. It's not going to be at the 1 mark. And then the third argument, the optional one, is the ending point within the original string where you want your substring to end. So then the round function is straightforward. And basically, you just give that one argument a decimal number, and it's going to round it to the nearest integer. So let's look briefly at slice and round in our sandbox here. Just some simple examples first. So slice, we'll start with the slice keyword. We'll give it a full string. So we'll give it, I'm in the mountains. And then our second argument is going to be the starting point. So if we wanted to start at the beginning, we would enter a 0. But I'm just going to enter 10 as the starting point, and then 19 as the ending point. And remember that third argument is optional. If you exclude it, then it's just going to run to the end of the original one. So you can see here that this returns just the substring mountain from our original string. So round is simple. Round keyword, you give it a decimal number and it rounds it to the nearest integer. So 2.3 rounds down to 2, 2.6 rounds up to 3. And then the other formula that we'll be working with is format. We discussed that in the 101 session as well. You remember the importance of data types, your input types that you use as your arguments within your formulas, and format converts a number to a text string. So you give it a number like 20 and it returns a string. We know this is a string because it's aligned to the left. If we just gave it just the number 20, it's going to be aligned to the right, meaning it's a number. So again, we're going to be working with if, slice, round, and format. We have obviously been working with if here. Slice is that one that creates the substring. Round rounds a decimal, and format converts a number to a string. So kind of a key step in creating progress bars in your Notion databases, you're going to want a property that calculates just a percentage, your percentage of progress, because all the visual progress bar is a representation of a percentage. So that percentage property is an important step. And there's kind of there's many different approaches you can take to calculating your percentage. I've included kind of 2 examples here, and one is simple. The other is more complex, and we can dive into it more probably in another session. So in this first example, I'm going to display our percentage property. It's currently hidden. In this first example, it's just we've got completed units as a percentage of total units. So for each project, you would just enter the total units, and then as you complete them, you would enter how many have been completed. So for example, I don't know why this came to mind, but it was the first that did. If you're a yearbook photographer and you're photographing students' headshots for a number of different classes, then each class might be a project. And each class is going to have a total number of students. And as you snap each student's headshot, you can tally up the number of completed students. And then this percent property will give you your percentage of students who have been photographed for each class. So for that, to calculate that, you would just reference the completed, divide those by the total. So that's straightforward. I'll do that. Okay, so let's do that. So we will reference the completed units property. And we will divide it by the total units property. And so that's going to give us an ugly percentage sometimes. And the reason why I hesitated on demonstrating this is because I wanted to show you a trick for kind of rounding your decimal percentages here. So what we can do is we can multiply this by 100. And we're going to include some parentheses here for our order of operations. Actually, and honestly, I didn't plan to demonstrate this, so I'm kind of trying to remember off the top of my head. But this question came up in our 101 session. I think it was like Edgar or maybe Homesick Travis or whatever his name is.
I think you had round at the beginning, didn't you?
I did. I'm just thinking about the process of it. Let me just do some Control Z's here to see exactly.
You get to see behind the curtain how the tinkering happens.
I told you mistakes are inevitable. Okay, so what we do here is, we perform our division to determine our decimal, and then we multiply that by 100, and then round it, and then divide by 100. Marie, is it helpful for me to walk through that, or should we keep on going?
Oh, I mean, it's up to the folks kind of watching. Do you want us to dig in deeper? Should we keep going?
Are they responding?
Yeah, let us know if you need us to go a little bit deeper into this particular example.
All right, I'm going to skip that for now because it might take a little bit too much time. We can revisit it during Q&A if we want to. So anyway, we just want to calculate our percentage, and you can round it or not round it if you want to. And at some point, we'll cover the rounding process, whether it's during Q&A or in another piece of material. But the key is we want our percentage property here. And to do that, we calculate our completed units as a percentage of total units. So another method of coming up with this percentage property is if you have a master tasks database and you have a master projects database, then you can use the relation property to link them. So you can see down here, we have this page here. This is just kind of a sample master tasks database. So we have a list of tasks here. They're each linked to project 1, and 2 of the 5 are completed, or 40% of them are checked. So because those are all linked to this project 1, we can add a roll-up property here. And when we choose the complete property within that tasks database, we have the option to display the percent checked. And I know that's a ton to absorb, and I think Marie and I are going to cover relations and rollups in another office hour, so we won't dive too much into that now. But you have the option to choose percent checked to display your 40% here, which is a really easy way of doing so, and a really kind of intelligent way of managing your projects and your tasks. But for our sake today, the importance is we have a property here that displays just a percentage. And in the first example, we have a property that displays a percentage as well. So we want to create a progress bar that visually represents that percentage in a nice way. So to do that, you're going to want to choose a fun, creative character to display your progress visually. And you're going to want to use a character that has kind of two formats. One is kind of a filled format, and one is an unfilled format. So you can see three examples here. One is circles. We have filled circles and unfilled circles. The other is stars, filled and unfilled stars. And then this last one is shades, which are denser shades and then less dense shades. So for our sake today, we're just going to be using the circles, the filled and the unfilled circles. So to create this progress bar, there's kind of three steps. There's kind of three pillars to what you're seeing within each progress bar. There's the filled characters that are kind of their independent text string, and they're concatenated to a series of unfilled characters. And then we've also concatenated the percentage displayed as a number. So you could do each of those three kind of buckets as independent properties and then concatenate them with a final property, but we're going to do them all together. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to use the slice property, and remember that first argument of the slice property is the full text string, and then we're going to specify a substring of that full text string to use to display as the output. So we're going to come up to our little code block up here, and we're going to start with slice. And for our first argument, we are going to display 10 solid circles. I just copied that so I could easily paste it here. We're going to display 10 solid circles as our total possible string. And then we are going to reference the percent property to determine how long we want the substring to be. So we're going to always start at the 0 spot. Remember, the way the indexing works is the first character is at the 0 spot. And then the final spot is going to be determined by the percentage. So what we're going to do is we're going to reference that percentage property, which we've called progress percent. And because that percentage is really a decimal, just displayed as an integer with a percent sign, we want to multiply it by 10 in order to give us a number between 1 and 10, because that's going to specify how many dots to fill. And then we want to round that because that's still going to give us 1 decimal place. So we'll wrap that in the round function. So this in itself is going to, and then we want to close out the top level slice. So this in itself should just give us our number of solid dots, our solid circles. And to add the unfilled circles, we're going to take a very similar approach. So we can just copy what we just wrote, and we'll add the concatenation operator, which is the plus sign when you're working with text strings, and then we can paste that. But of course, this time around, we're going to be working with unfilled circles. So I'm going to use unfilled in our initial string here. And what we want to do with the percentage is we want to use the percentage that is not occupied by the solids. So we're going to start by subtracting that percentage property from 1. And then we'll wrap that for the order of operations. And that will give us the unfilled circles that we want. And now, because we included those line breaks, we want to paste it into our URL bar first. And then we can paste it into our formula property. So now we have our filled circles and our unfilled circles. And the last step we want to take is adding our percentage as a number. But because we're working with a text string here, it's not as easy as just referencing that property, because you can't concatenate a number. This is technically a number to a text string. So what we're going to need to do is we'll add our concatenation operator again. And then we are going to want to add a space between them. So I'll start with that space, add another concatenation operator, and then we're going to want to take that percentage property. So we'll reference that again. And we remember that's really just a decimal place. So we want it to display as a number between 1 and 100. So we're going to multiply that by 100. And then we need to convert it to a text string. So we're going to use that format function to do that. So we've wrapped it now in the format function. And that should give us what we want almost. Oh, I pasted it into the wrong property. So that should give us what we want here. So now the last step is just concatenating that percent symbol. So we'll just add one more, we'll use that concatenation operator one more time, add the percent, and that is our final visual progress bar. Now there is one more step to this. If the percentage happens to be 0, you need to add an if test to this last step. But I'm throwing a ton at you, I know, and time is long, so I'm just not going to include that part for now. But as with the rounding, we can revisit that at any time. So that is our visual progress bar. And of course, we did our automated prioritization. Now, obviously, like I said, that is a ton to digest, and you certainly didn't digest it all here right now. So this webcast will be recorded and available on Notion's YouTube channel. And then over on Notion VIP, there's also a post for each of these exercises with a text explanation of everything that we just did. So you can work through that at your own pace. Even if you don't care about visual progress bars and you don't care about automating your task prioritization, these exercises are intended to get you familiar with working with formulas, and particularly that if function, which is so widely versatile. So I encourage you to practice these exercises on your own. And if you run into any obstacles, feel free to find me on Twitter, send me a tweet, and I'm at William Nutt, and I'll be happy to help you work through them. And then, as I mentioned, we will probably cover those relations and roll-ups at some point. And in what may be a Formulas 301 session, I want to cover, this is just kind of a little teaser, I want to cover the replace and replace all functions because those are really, really useful as well. And what you can do with those is you can extract text strings from another text string, such as the domain that we've extracted from the email address here. And then you can also do kind of a mail merge where if you have someone's name and their company, then you can create personalized like emails and invitations for them that can be easily copied and pasted into an email composition window, which I use all the time. So that is your teaser for 301, but I think you probably have your plate full with 201 for now. So with that, Marie, back to you.
That is awesome. I don't know if anyone else feels like they wish they paid more attention in math class, but this was honestly like a really amazing breakdown. Given the slice, I'm definitely a tinkerer and a hacker, and so I like often copy and paste pieces and kind of play and try and figure out what the numbers are doing. But this actually broke it down, so I almost know what the heck is going on. So hopefully other folks feel like they're a lot further along now. Lots of questions came in too, so maybe we can dig into the ask a question area and open it up a little bit. Some of which may or may not be related to this session, and so if not, we can always kind of defer them to a future session. Are there links to the pages being shown William, if you want to send me any of those links that you want to include, we'll add it to the call to action button to the bottom of this session to make sure everyone's got access to any of these examples.
Yeah, these will all certainly be available for your duplication, and you can see exactly how these formulas are constructed. And we'll also be sure to include them within the recording of the webcast in the description on YouTube.
Perfect. Lance asked, so is the syntax all JS?
It's based roughly on JS. You probably recognized the operators. Those will be familiar from JavaScript, as among other programming languages. It's not explicitly JavaScript, but it's based on it in some capacity.
Cool. Mike asked, does Notion allow formulas to operate on data in a different database?
No, but you can typically use the relation and roll-up capabilities to bring to bring that value over into the database that you want to include that formula in, and then just hide the reference to it. There are some exceptions. It can be tricky because, like, when you reference a date, for example, it doesn't necessarily translate as a date type, but generally speaking, you can use relations and rollups to bring them into the current database.
Awesome. FTab says, let's say I have a select property with 4 options to select from. Is there any way that these options get selected by themselves using a formula taking input from some other property? So I think he's talking about updating a select property. I don't think you can actually affect a select property, can you? Like, you can create formulas based on other properties, but I don't think you can do the other way around.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not going to be able to manipulate a select property using a formula, but you can always use a formula to display whatever you want to display. It's just not going to be formatted as a select property with the pretty colors.
Yeah. I love the Notion face illustrations. Is there a place we can download them all?
No. I mean, Marie, you can probably speak to this better than me, but I don't think there's a central like repository for them. But if there's demand for that, I don't think that Notion is particularly like protective of them. I mean, I know that the illustrator of them is absolutely brilliant, and you can find his information. He's on Instagram with like 40,000 followers. He's a renowned illustrator. But in terms of accessing all of those portraits, I'm not sure they're available anywhere, but that could be something that they would consider.
Yeah, there is a resource. I'm just going to double check. Someone I think was selling these on Gumroad. They're like Notion-like faces, but it's not.
Oh, people, yeah. Something. Yeah, I actually mistook those for the Notion illustrator because they're so similar.
They're called Open Peeps.
Open Peeps, that's right.
I don't have the link to the specific place to find it, but it's called Open Peeps, and I think it was on Product Hunt. You can Google that, Product Hunt Open Peeps, and you might be able to find.
I got it. It's just openpeeps.com.
Perfect. Yeah, those are pretty great. Tony asked, do you know if Notion is coming out with a book that will go from basics to advanced, like a Notion Bible? Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what William and I are trying to do, is like fill some of those gaps and fill that content. But I don't know if Notion specifically has sort of like a beginning to end, everything that you need to know. I mean, their documentation is amazing. I don't know if you want to extrapolate on that, William.
Yeah, so that would be really helpful. There are a lot of really, really helpful resources. And to that point, I think that there are a number of us, like Marie said, us two in particular, are trying to be as resourceful as possible for all users. And obviously users have various levels of experience. And so it would be helpful to know kind of how to start from square one and the exact sequence to work through all of these resources. So I think what you're likely to see is not entirely original resources like a book, but what you're likely to see are aggregations of existing resources with some instruction for where to start and how to work through them. So there are a lot of Notion pros and experts out there that are trying to be really resourceful and producing a lot of material. So you're likely to see that. And then there's a number of who already have classes that kind of are intended to serve that purpose. I mean, Marie's master class is really kind of the golden example of all of them, and then there are a few others, but that's definitely, there's still kind of a void for that with a few in the works.
Yeah, and I know, like with Notion, they're trying to build out specific use cases, because I don't think it's not so straightforward to go from 0 to 60, because everyone's use case is so different and the way we're going to use it is quite different. And so I think addressing very specific use cases, like here's how a product design team would use Notion, or here's how an engineering team, or here's how you might use it for managing your family life. There's so many different scenarios. I think it would be really hard to kind of cover all of that in a sort of how-to. And so I think there's a lot of resources out there if you're a little more specific about kind of how you want to use it.
Yeah, to that point, Notion, it's important to keep in mind that it's so flexible that what you want to do is you want to learn the fundamentals. You don't want to start to memorize like particular applications of Notion, because you want to be able to tailor it to suit your unique needs. And so if you learn the fundamentals of it, then and you practice with sort of the exercises that we just did with the formulas, then you'll have a good grasp of how you can apply those strategies to your specific needs. So a book with a whole bunch of different specific applications of Notion wouldn't be as helpful as just kind of a few kind of example use cases that you can grasp the concepts with, and then apply them to your real use cases.
Yeah, and I think, William and I have discussed this before, because we both do Notion consulting, but I personally don't do done for you services, because I feel like if I just build the space and people don't know how to use what I've created for them, it's not going to be as valuable and useful. And so people really do need to understand the fundamentals of the space that they're using day to day. So I'll work with people, workshopping their space, but I want to make sure they understand those fundamentals. Otherwise, it's not going to be valuable just to provide those templates without that extra context. Couple more questions. Magda said, hi, I've downloaded your Master 2020 Life Planner. One thing that makes it impossible to use Notion for is the lack of ability to set up recurring events / repeating events. Please advise how to best automate this. I have covered this a little bit in a past office hour session, and I will go a little bit deeper on a weekly agenda, weekly planning sort of task management session, because recurring tasks don't work the way they might in Asana or other tools, but I use a Kanban board, and I have a tag that's a day property that's called recurring. And so those always show up in my weekly tasks when I'm looking at my tasks. But we can go a little bit deeper into that. I think it's probably not super related to the 201 formulas. I'm sure there's ways to automate, when a date appears, but then you kind of lose the date reminder property and things like that. So
there are a lot of workarounds. That's a highly demanded feature, and Notion knows that that's really keeping a lot of users from jumping over from other tools like Todoist. And it's certainly one that I want to see soon. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in one of the next big releases. Something else that I'm eager to see, and this may or may not be important to this crowd here, but I really want to be able to generate the title property with a formula, because I like to use a unique value for each title, and sometimes that's combining like first name and last name, for example. And currently, you're not able to do that in Notion, and you cannot have a database without that title property. So if you are going to Notion and making your request, you might slide that in there.
Right. Arsene asked, is there a way to show different quotes every day with a table database using formulas? I think I've seen a couple of variations of this, but maybe that's something we could cover I feel like maybe Alex Sherwood or someone posted an example of how to do this.
Yeah, that's another example of kind of finding workarounds for it, because it's not really a native feature. But yeah, I mean, I won't jump into the demonstration now, but off the top of my head, and this is definitely one that we can cover in another session, but you could definitely use the whoever asked that question. If you're tinkering, that'll definitely include the today function, which remains current with the exact current date and time. And so if you combine that within an if function, you can see, like if today you'd want a master database of quotes, and then a different some kind of different number for each quote. And then you could combine that with the if and the today function to display only one at a time, depending on what today's date is. I know that's probably not very helpful. We'd have to get in there and tinker with it, but the solution is definitely along those lines.
Cool. Edgar asked, date, just simply the date. I'd love to have my page start with today. Today's date is boom, there it is. However, I have to have an inline table with a formula. Really? William, any ideas?
You do, but you don't have to display it as a table, Edgar. So you might display it as a gallery with just one like pretty card. And you could display your date within that pretty card, but that's going to be as close as you can get to just displaying your date at the top of your page. So mess around with that. Do you have display just kind of one property, which is today's date, and display it as a gallery. And obviously you'll use that today function, and that'll get you as close as you can get to what you want.
And I mean, don't forget too, you can always use the @ today, and you can use @ timestamps in page titles. So you absolutely can do that if you just wanted to. Like, I know a lot of people do this for their daily journal. They'll actually type in @ today, and that generates the date, today's date as their journal entry date. So a lot of folks will do that.
Right. That's not going to remain current with the current date, though, just to specify for Edgar.
It does.
That would be the date that it's created, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have to dig a little deeper into that. I see a lot of people have implemented planners in Notion, years, quarters, months, etc. Creating the first few are fine, but how do you template this? This may or may not have to do with formulas. Haha, thanks for y'all's work. I definitely enter those dates. Like when I'm creating a new agenda, I'm putting in the date fields and I'm putting in those dates manually. I don't find that prohibitively time consuming enough that's just part of my weekly process of creating those dates. But I don't know if you have any input on that, William.
Well, Marie is the master of these sorts of weekly, quarterly, yearly templates. But as you're kind of setting those up, and if you were to create like a yearly template in a database that includes like every day, just if you've worked with Google Sheets at all, and you're somewhat familiar with that, I very often am pasting from Google Sheets. So it's really easy to generate a full year's worth of dates in Google Sheets by just filling down, if you're familiar with that term. And then you can paste them directly into a Notion table versus like literally picking a date property 365 times. So just as you're configuring those kind of master databases, consider what you can do with Google Sheets if you're familiar with that.
Right. And I have so many templates and things. For example, like every day of the week has a different template because there are certain key activities that I would do. Like every Monday I have this class, or every Wednesday I have this exercise class. So I actually have a number of properties. If I click Wednesday to create that template, so for me, it doesn't take that much time for me to type in like MAR 25 and then hit my template, and all the properties that I need are kind of already spun up with all of my embedded task databases and things like that. So to me, the templates, I feel like save me so much time that I don't find it that time consuming to add a sort of new entry to my journal every day, if that makes sense. But to each his own. I know we're coming up on the hour now. And a lot of these are kind of related to maybe deeper lessons, like whether it's roll-ups that we'd go into or a weekly planner and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, there should be an opportunity in the survey, the follow-up survey, if Marie and the team still send that out. I always like to ask for recommendations where you'd like us to focus next. So we mentioned that we'll be doing relations and roll-ups. I really think it would be helpful for everyone to work with the replace and the replace all functions. But if you have anything that you're eager to see, function related or otherwise, then mention it there and we'll dive into that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dig into the relations and roll-ups for sure. But we definitely want to know what you want to hear more about, because obviously we tailor these sessions. And William, I just think your instructional style is so great. Like you really, really break things down so that people really do understand the
Well,
fundamentals. So
thank you,
I'm
Marie. It's
grateful.
really it's really hard. We have so many different, as I said, so many different levels of experience among users. So some will find this totally overwhelming. Others will find it really elementary. So if you're on one end of that spectrum or the other, just know that we're trying to find that middle ground that's helpful to the largest segment of people. So it's really working through the recorded version of this will be helpful because you can do it exactly at your own pace.
Yeah. Awesome. So William, I'll follow up with you to grab any of the links that are relevant and just make sure to add them to this event too, but keep an eye on the YouTube channel where Notion will post the link to this video as well, and any related, any things we referenced, links, notion.vip and all of that. So I'm sure you'll want to rewatch it and pause it at certain points and play with some of that code yourself and kind of take it and run with it. So thank you so much, William. I'm excited for our next session. We'll coordinate on that and figure out when to schedule that probably in the coming weeks. And in the meantime, stay safe, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for letting me join you again, Marie.
For sure. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care.